In this event, it's Irish Freddie Fraley doing battle with the 360-pound Zebra Kid.
And the next bout at 100, that 15-minute time limit, coming in at 131 pounds under his opponent's weight, is that San Bernardino boy, Irishman Freddie Fraley. And meeting the Zebra Kid. Take it away, Mike.
Irish Freddie Fraley taking on the Zebra Kid in this special event. Our referee, Iron Mike Mazurki. Zebra Kid, 360 pounds, and boy, he knows how to use every pound of it.
Professional wrestling has always thrived on larger-than-life characters, but long before colorful television superheroes and elaborate entrances became the norm, one masked wrestler was already proving the power of visual presentation. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, as television began transforming professional wrestling from a live attraction into a weekly household obsession, audiences were introduced to a bizarre sight unlike anything they had seen before: a massive heavyweight covered head to toe in black and white zebra stripes. The man beneath the mask was George Bolus, but fans knew him as the Zebra Kid. Created by legendary promoter Jack Pfeffer, a master showman notorious for his outrageous gimmicks and copycat characters, the Zebra Kid was designed to stand out in an increasingly crowded wrestling landscape. While many of Pfeffer's creations were short-lived curiosities, Bolus turned the unusual persona into a genuine attraction, becoming one of the most recognizable wrestling characters of television's earliest era. Long before he became one of television wrestling's most unusual attractions, George Bolus was a standout athlete in the industrial city of Warren, Ohio. Born on September 19, 1923, to Greek immigrant parents, Bolus grew up during the Great Depression and developed a reputation as a gifted competitor from an early age. His athletic ability earned him an opportunity to go to Ohio State University, where he initially joined the football program. Bolus possessed plenty of size and strength, but breaking into the lineup proved difficult. Seeing potential in his physical gifts, Ohio State's coaches suggested he try wrestling as a way to improve his quickness, conditioning, and agility. The recommendation would alter the course of his life. Despite standing only around 5 feet 10 and carrying well over 300 pounds, Bolus quickly proved to be a natural on the mat. Competing in the unlimited weight division, he combined surprising athleticism with overwhelming strength, making him a difficult opponent for anyone to handle. His success came almost immediately. As a freshman, he captured the Big Ten Heavyweight Championship, then repeated the accomplishment the following season, establishing himself as one of the premier collegiate wrestlers in the country. The pinnacle of his amateur career arrived on March 23, 1946. Facing Morris Chitwood of Indiana University in the NCAA Heavyweight Finals, George delivered the performance that defined his collegiate legacy. When the match ended, he stood as the NCAA Heavyweight Champion, a title that confirmed his status as one of the most dominant amateur wrestlers of his era. Even while building his reputation in college wrestling, George had already begun looking toward the professional ranks. Like many amateur athletes of the time, he sought ways to earn extra money while still in school. During the 1946 and 1947 seasons, he made occasional appearances for Ohio promoter Al Haft, wrestling under the mysterious masked identity of the Mystery Man. Al Haft was often in the habit of hiring Ohio State athletes to perform at his shows, usually under a mask in order to evade any unpleasant questions about amateur standing. Though these early matches were little more than a side venture, they provided George with his first taste of the professional wrestling business, and hinted at a future that would eventually make him famous. After capturing the NCAA Heavyweight Championship, George Bolus made the leap into professional wrestling full-time in late 1947. He began his career under Haft, but like many ambitious young wrestlers of the era, he quickly set his sights on bigger opportunities. While wrestling in New York as the Greek Hercules in 1948, Bolus generated enough controversy to make headlines after an incident that reportedly sparked a riot among fans. The fallout led to his being barred from the area, forcing him to seek work elsewhere. Rather than allowing the setback to derail his career, Bolus hit the road, traveling through various territories and reinventing himself along the way. Yet none of these other identities would leave a lasting mark on wrestling history. That distinction belonged to the character that emerged later in 1948, the Zebra Kid. Exactly who created the gimmick remains one of wrestling's enduring mysteries. Bolus himself later offered a simple explanation. According to him, years of dramatic weight fluctuations had left stretch marks across his body, prompting fellow wrestlers to jokingly nickname him Zebra. He claimed the idea eventually evolved into a wrestling character while he was working in the Los Angeles area in 1948. But there is another, perhaps more likely, version of events. In September 1948, Bolus signed with Jack Pfeffer, one of the most colorful and controversial promoters in professional wrestling history. Pfeffer had built a reputation on sensationalism. He adored bizarre attractions, copycat stars, masked wrestlers, and gimmicks that could grab a fan's attention before a match even began. If there was a way to make a wrestler look more unusual, more controversial, or more memorable, Pfeffer was willing to try it. George Bolus presented an interesting challenge. He had legitimate athletic credentials, a championship amateur background, and an imposing physique, but none of it had translated into major stardom. As George Bolus, he was just another heavyweight on a crowded wrestling landscape. As the Zebra Kid, however, he became impossible to ignore. Whatever the true origin, the combination proved remarkably successful. Covered head to toe in zebra stripes and hidden behind a mask, Bolus transformed from a talented but largely anonymous heavyweight into one of the most recognizable attractions of early television wrestling. The Zebra Kid was exactly the kind of gimmick Jack Pfeffer loved to promote, and exactly the kind of spectacle that audiences could not forget. By the late 1940s, Jack Pfeffer had established a small but influential promotional base in Toledo, Ohio, where he showcased a roster built on spectacle as much as athletic ability. Among the names passing through his shows was one of the biggest future legends of the sport, and a prototype for what a wrestling superstar would be, Buddy Rogers. But it was the masked figure of the Zebra Kid who became one of Pfeffer's most striking attractions. On July 7, 1949, the Zebra Kid reached a new level of prominence when he defeated Buddy Rogers for Pfeffer's version of the World Heavyweight title, a championship that existed within the promoter's own territorial world. It was a signature Pfeffer move, creating stakes that felt grand in scale while keeping them contained within his own promotion. Despite his success in the promotion, Bolus's relationship with Pfeffer was far from smooth. Known for his erratic habits, Bolus had a tendency to arrive late to arenas, sometimes showing up only minutes before a show was set to begin. In a business built on timing and coordination, it was a trait that wore thin on promoters and colleagues alike, and it added strain to an already complicated working relationship. Eventually, Bolus moved on. A year or so later, he crossed paths with another rising star of the post-war wrestling world, Vern Gagne, and made his way to the Minneapolis territory. There, his career found a new rhythm. The Zebra Kid character was an immediate success in the Midwest, where he was positioned in high-profile matches. Meanwhile, back in Pfeffer's world, the idea of the Zebra Kid outgrew the man who first brought it to life. Pfeffer, ever the opportunist, seemed to conclude that the gimmick itself was more valuable than any individual performer. He continued to introduce new versions of the character across his shows. In northern New Jersey in 1951, he promoted Len Montana and Carol Kowalski as the Super Zebra Kids, and later even had veteran Billy Sando assume the stripe persona. Montana would continue using the Zebra Kid identity in other territories, including appearances for Capitol Wrestling, run by Toots Mondt and Vince McMahon Sr., before later resurfacing in Florida under Eddie Graham in 1961. Yet despite the many variations and reinterpretations, there was little serious debate among those who followed the sport closely. George Bolas was the original Zebra Kid and the one who wore the mask in the greatest number of matches. By November 1951, the Zebra Kid had firmly established himself as a legitimate main event attraction in the North American wrestling circuit. That night in Toledo, Ohio, he stepped into the ring with Lou Thesz, one of the most technically gifted and respected champions in the sport's history. Though he came up short in the title match, the mere fact that he was positioned opposite Thesz spoke volumes about his standing in the industry. By 1952, the Zebra Kid's reputation carried him west to the San Francisco territory, where he shared the ring with one of the most influential figures in global wrestling history, Ricky Dozan. Their matches were competitive and drew enough interest to spark something larger than a simple territorial program. What began in California soon evolved into a recurring international association, as the two would go on to face each other again in Hawaii and later in Japan, laying early groundwork for the growing exchange between American and Japanese professional wrestling. In October 1954, he signed with Honolulu promoter Al Karasik, beginning what would become one of the most rewarding periods of his career. In Hawaii, he appeared to have found the perfect environment for his character. Now in his early 30s, Bolas had trimmed his weight to around 270 pounds. He remained powerfully built, but the reduction in size gave him added mobility and a sharper in-ring style without sacrificing the strength that had always defined him. Honolulu in the mid-1950s was more than just another stop on the wrestling circuit. It was a crossroads where American talent and Japanese stars frequently intersected, creating a unique and competitive atmosphere unlike most territorial systems on the mainland. In this environment, the Zebra Kid thrived. Far from being a fading novelty, he was once again a featured attraction, proof that, under the right circumstances, the character still had the power to draw attention. By the mid to late 1950s, the Zebra Kid had become as much a traveling phenomenon as a single, fixed identity. His career was defined not only by his size and presence, but by the nature of his storytelling inside the ring, particularly the dramatic unmaskings that often concluded his major programs. These moments were box office gold for promoters, but they also carried a hidden cost. Once the mask came off in a given territory, the illusion was shattered, making it difficult, if not impossible, for Bolas to return in the same form. As a result, the Zebra Kid was constantly on the move, reinventing his presence from region to region across North America. By 1958, his reputation had carried him far beyond the continental United States. He embarked on his first extended overseas tour, wrestling across Australia and New Zealand. 2 years later, in 1960, Bolas took the Zebra Kid persona into Europe, appearing in major cities such as Paris and Athens. One of the most notable moments of this tour came in Greece, where he defeated the national hero Lambrakis before an estimated crowd of 43,000 spectators, a victory that underscored how far the character had traveled from its American television origins. While abroad in England, the Zebra Kid experienced a significant personal milestone. He and his wife Angela welcomed their only child, George Jr., anchoring a rare sense of stability in an otherwise itinerant career. Despite the growing reputation that the Zebra Kid would later enjoy in British wrestling circles, he returned to the United States relatively quickly. One of his most significant rivalries in the States came against Lou Thesz, who at the time stood on the cusp of what would become his sixth reign as NWA World Heavyweight Champion. The two traded victories, with each man scoring a win on home turf, but it was their final encounter on August 9th at the Olympic Auditorium that became the defining moment of the feud. In front of a packed Los Angeles crowd, Thesz finally overcame the Zebra Kid, scoring the pinfall after executing an airplane spin followed by a body slam. In a dramatic conclusion befitting their history, Thesz then unmasked his opponent in the middle of the ring. Just days later, the Zebra Kid resurfaced halfway across the world in Japan. Alongside seasoned international heels, he toured extensively throughout Japan, competing in major cities across the country. The tours often featured dense schedules of tag team matches, 2- and 3-man combinations designed to showcase foreign villains against rising Japanese stars, further cementing the Zebra Kid as a recognizable and reliable antagonist in the global expansion of professional wrestling. By the early 1960s, now in his early 40s, the Zebra Kid began to look beyond the ring and toward the promotional side of the business, hoping to translate decades of experience into control over his own bookings and direction. In 1965, he attempted to build that future in Greece, working alongside a cousin to promote a series of events that blended his international reputation with local star power. The venture briefly showed promise. In Athens, the Zebra Kid even stepped back into the ring in front of a crowd of roughly 15,000 fans. But the trip quickly unraveled. The Greek venture ended in chaos when his cousin disappeared with the promotion's funds, leaving Bolus stranded, broke, and forced to navigate his way out of the country on his own. It was a harsh reminder of how precarious the wrestling business could be, especially for those operating outside the established territorial structures. By 1968, the physical toll of a long and punishing career could no longer be ignored. After suffering a serious eye injury in Germany the year before, Bolus returned to Akron, Ohio, effectively stepping away from active competition. Years of wrestling had left him with damaged knees, lingering health issues, and weight-related complications that only worsened over time. The man who had once been one of the most imposing masked figures in wrestling was now quietly closing the book on his in-ring life. Just a few years later, in 1977, George passed away. Years later, in September 1998, his legacy received a formal recognition that bridged both sides of his life. During halftime at an Ohio State University football game, his wife Angela and son George Jr. were introduced on the field as part of an honor celebrating his collegiate achievements. More than 4 decades after he captured the NCAA Heavyweight Championship for Ohio State, Bolus Sr. was inducted into the university's Athletic Hall of Fame. Yet in the world of professional wrestling, his memory has endured in a very different form. To fans and historians, he remains best known not as the collegiate champion from Ohio or the would-be promoter in Europe, but as the towering masked figure who came to life under television lights and territorial crowds. George Bolus was the athlete. The Zebra Kid was the legend.